Hello, my name is Paul Stewart and I'm at Sydney Airport where I'm about to fly to Brisbane, which is exciting, mostly because it's not Hobart, in a Qantas Airbus A330. Now today's flight is an economy, so instead of focusing on the seat and service and food like I usually would, I'll be focusing more on the aviation geek side of things, so there'll be a lot more footage out the window of the wing and engines and flaps, ailerons and stuff like that.
Qantas used their 72 Boeing 737-800s for the majority of domestic flights, and their 28 A330s spend most of their time on international and transcontinental routes. Having said that, you can still snag an A330 on East Coast flights, and I must admit, I prefer them for a number of reasons I'll mention later. Here's my aircraft for today's 750-kilometre journey. This particular A330-300 was built in 2005 and was repainted in their new Qantas livery, which provided for a fantastic foreground in footage you'll see later. Here's a quick peek at business class, although, being the pleb that I am, I kept walking to seat 24A. Let's look at this seat in more detail. There was perfectly adequate legroom for my 182cm frame, and there's this weird net thing to hold your feet. I guess it might work if you have shorter legs. I just found it more comfortable just to stick my feet as far under the seat in front. Now above that are two storage pockets, ideally sized for a tablet or small laptop. There's also a fold-out table, which included complimentary stains from the previous flight or flights, and above that is a really well-sized storage spot for phones, passports or small drink bottles. There's also an adjustable touchscreen with a USB port underneath. Now there's also a single standard power plug which you share with your neighbour down near your legs. Now the in-flight entertainment screen is perfectly fine, and I usually find Qantas have a decent selection of TV shows and movies. And thankfully you're able to skip ahead through the ads, but just make sure you don't go too far forward and miss the start of the movie. Now thankfully there's also overhead air vents, which I really appreciate as I find cabins often too hot. There's also adjustable headrests, and when the seat reclines it moves slightly forward to increase the angle of flatness. The aero bridge withdrew and we headed for the runway. Keen ab geeks will recognise Shep's Mound, where plane nerds are known to congregate and flirt with the passing planes. I'll speed through some of the takeoff and include a link to the footage at normal speed in the video description below. Now sit back and enjoy the General Electric CF6s spool up and some amazing views of Sydney Harbour. Now for those international viewers, Sydney is Australia's largest city and home to the Sydney Roosters, who I'd say are consistently in the top 16 teams in the NRL. These Roosters play rugby, which for you Europeans is a lot like soccer really, although played by men with no teeth. If you're ever taking off from Sydney Airport towards the north, keep a close eye out of the windows for some stunning views of the harbour. We turned to the right and headed off over the coastline before turning north. By the way, how good does the new Qantas livery look? I've never been a huge fan of the A330's wings as they look rather plain, although that little red roof makes the winglets look pretty interesting. On the topic of amazing winglets, how cool are the wings on the new Airbus A350? Here's some great shots I captured on Malaysian and China Airlines flights from the last few months. Once we reached cruising altitude, breakfast was served. I actually thought it was pretty good considering the flight was only 60 minutes. After that, I sat back and watched TV and was regularly interrupted by pretty impressive views out of the window. By the way, if you're a keen aviation nerd and like the views I'm showing you now, make sure you check out my Instagram and Facebook pages. After about 20 minutes, at a cruising altitude of around 37,000 feet, our descent into Brisbane began. It was a stunning day in Queensland and we got a great view of the Gold Coast. After some circle work over Moreton Bay, we lined up and landed into Brisbane Airport. Now I find the engineering of wings quite interesting, which is probably why I'm so much fun in social settings. Well, I think I am. You can see here the slats deploying from the wing's leading edge, and these are designed to increase lift. Most modern airliners have a similar design, although the 747 is interesting because they use Kruger flaps, which fold up from underneath the wing. Look, I could ramble on about the 747 for ages, but that's for another video, and again, the link to that is in the video description below. Now I must admit that I prefer the A330 over the 737s for a few reasons. They're larger and I find they're less adversely affected by turbulence. In business class, they actually have proper private suites versus the recliners in the 737. And in economy, the window seats are only in pairs rather than threes, so you have less people to climb over. Obviously, the bulkhead seat doesn't have anyone reclining into you, although the legroom is restricted as you're not able to stick your feet under the seat in front. Anyway, it was a perfectly comfortable flight and I love the views, especially over Sydney Harbour. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, subscribe and check out my channel for heaps more aviation videos, including Qantas A380 First Class and the business class in the new 787 Dreamliner. Thanks for watching.